This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission today, well, it's all about foundations, isn't it?
It really is.
We are taking a custom-tailored, a really structured look at the foundational era of Western thought Greek philosophy. If you've ever felt maybe a bit overwhelmed by all the names, the huge timeline, this deep dive is designed to give you that structured understanding.
Think of it like the source code period for Western intellectual history. This Greek era, it's where everything, ethics, math, politics, science, it was all discussed together, unified, before splitting off.
Ah, okay.
So our task today is to trace that focus, how it shifted, sometimes quite dramatically over, well, about 1,000 years.
And it's an incredible story of focus shifting. Our sources map this out beautifully. We start with philosophy looking outwards, right? At the vastness of nature, the cosmos. Then it zooms in, focusing on social order. Then even tighter on the individual and finding happiness.
And finally.
Finally, reaching for transcendence. So that whole arc, from the universe down to the self and maybe beyond, that's our backbone for today.
Exactly. And to give you that structure, we're breaking it down into 4 distinct ages, sort of thematic periods defined by where that main thought center was.
Okay, let's dive in. Phase I. Right at the beginning, what was the big question that kicked it all off?
Phase I, that's the pre-Socratics, the age of nature, roughly 6th to 5th century BC. And the big thing here is this huge leap they made, moving away from explaining things with myths, Zeus throws lightning,
right,
to using logos, reason, rational inquiry.
Okay, let's unpack that core question then. So they weren't yet asking, how should I live my life?
Not primarily, no. They were obsessed, really, with one foundational puzzle. What's the origin? The arche. What's the basic stuff the world is made of?
The substance of it all.
Precisely. They were trying to define the physis, the sort of underlying order of the cosmos, but without resorting to gods pulling the strings.
Like Thales thinking it was all water.
Exactly like Thales. Or Heraclitus, who saw constant change, flux, famously said you can't step in the same river twice.
What's change?
Then you get Parmenides arguing the complete opposite. That change is just an illusion. And true being? Well, that's permanent, unchanging.
Wow, okay, so right from the start, you've got this fundamental tension, change versus permanence, motion versus stillness.
You got it. They were sort of mapping the big physical questions. And we can't forget Democritus.
Ah, the atom guy.
The atom guy. Proposing these indivisible particles, atoms, centuries before we could even dream of proving it. Pure reason at work. Exploring the universe with thought alone.
So after all that cosmic wondering, something must have happened. The focus shifts pretty dramatically in Phase 2. Socrates, Plato, and the Sophists, the age of man and ethics, 5th to 4th century BC. What pulled their gaze away from the stars?
Well, the Greek city-state, the polis, was becoming much more complex. And with that came really pressing questions about how to organize society, how to live together.
Politics and ethics become central.
Exactly. The inquiry pivots sharply from physis, the natural world, to man, society, and this crucial question of virtue. Socrates' famous line.
The unexamined life is not worth living.
That's the one. It's all about self-knowledge and ethical living now.
And this is where we hit that major clash, right? Between the Sophists and Socrates, Plato.
Oh, absolutely. The Sophists, people like Protagoras, were pushing a kind of relativism.
Man is the measure of all things, meaning truth is just subjective.
That was the implication. Maybe a bit cynical, maybe just practical for teaching rhetoric in a democracy. But Plato and Socrates saw it as a fundamental threat. If there's no objective truth, how can you have justice? Or goodness?
So Plato's whole philosophy becomes this quest.
A quest for universal objective ideals, the forms. He thought the physical world was just a shadow of this higher perfect reality.
The sources call it an ascending philosophy, looking upward vertically to find the perfect form of justice or beauty or goodness itself.
Yes, and the way to get there for the individual was resi excellence, virtue often pursued through rigorous questioning, the dialectic.
Okay, so Plato's aiming for these perfect, unchanging ideals. That naturally leads us to the next phase, which feels distinct. Phase 3, Aristotle, the age of systematization, 4th century BC.
It is distinct. Aristotle is different because he didn't just offer a philosophy. He built a whole intellectual system, interlocking, comprehensive. It covered basically everything.
And if Plato was looking up to the forms, the sources say Aristotle was more constructive. grounded.
That's a great way to put it, the constructive philosophy.
Yeah.
He wasn't looking outside the world for truth. He was looking within it, through careful observation, classification, logic.
So less ascending, more building.
Exactly. He essentially invented the academic disciplines as we know them. He took the big soup of knowledge and carved it up. Logic, ethics, politics, metaphysics, biology, physics. Each became its own field of episteme, of knowledge.
And his framework dominated thinking for, what, 2 millennia?
Easily.
Yeah.
Because he provided the tools. His logic, his concepts, like defining things by their eidos form and hylen.
And their telos, their purpose.
Crucially, their telos, their final cause. It gave people a repeatable, rational way to analyze and understand pretty much anything. That systematic approach, that's the real foundation for later science.
Incredible. Okay, so after that massive effort of system building, where does Greek thought go next? Phase 4, Hellenism and Neoplatonism, the age of the individual and mystery. This spans a long time, 3rd century BC to 6th century AD. What's the shift here?
Context is absolutely key. Alexander the Great's conquests had shattered that old ideal of the small, self-contained city-state.
The polis.
Right. Suddenly, individuals felt kind of adrift in these huge, multicultural, often unstable empires. The big question wasn't, what's the ideal state anymore? It was more like, how do I find peace in all this chaos?
Exactly. Ataraxia, inner peace, tranquility. That became the goal.
And that's why you get these schools of thought that sound almost like ancient self-help. Pretty much. The Stoics preached acceptance of fate, living in accordance with the cosmic logos, doing your duty. The Epicureans aimed for peace by minimizing pain and fear, seeking pleasure, but mainly the simple ones. They were practical life philosophies.
Makes sense.
And the whole long era kind of culminates in Neoplatonism with Plotinus. Here, philosophy starts to merge back towards the mystical, even religious, seeking union with the transcendent one, to hen.
So it circles back, in a way, from the cosmic order to the individual's inner cosmos.
A return to cosmic unity, yeah, but through a very personal internal journey, often going beyond just pure reason.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, because while all this philosophical shifting was happening from cosmic questions in Athens to individual peace across the Hellenistic world, there was this parallel track. Equally powerful, arguably, defining the actual structure of knowledge, often happening elsewhere. We need to fit the mathematicians Pythagoras, Euclid, Archimedes into this picture.
Yes, absolutely crucial. Let's start with Pythagoras. We place him way back in Phase I, the pre-Socratic era, 6th century BC. He's the ancestor figure here.
Right.
His big contribution. The idea that the universe is fundamentally mathematical, that numbers and ratios aren't just tools for counting, they are the essence of reality.
And his method, it was a bit different, wasn't it? More mystical.
It seems so. More experiential. They discovered truths, like the geometric theorem named after him, almost like revelations. Not quite the rigorous proof system we think of later.
Okay, so contrast that with Euclid. He shows up much later, start of Phase 3, the Hellenistic period, around the 3rd century BC.
Right, and significantly, he's not primarily in Athens. He's in Alexandria, Egypt, the new intellectual hub, sponsored by Ptolemy Phase, one of Alexander's generals.
And Euclid is the great organizer, the editor, as the sources put it.
That's perfect. He embodies that systematic spirit we saw with Aristotle, but applies it to mathematics. He took all those scattered discoveries from Pythagoras, Eudoxus, others,
And locked them into a system.
an axiomatic system. That's the genius of his elements. It's not just a collection of facts. He starts with a few basic self-evident truths, axioms, and postulates things you just have to accept.
Like a straight line can be drawn between any 2 points.
Exactly. And from those few starting points, using pure logic step by step, he proves everything else, hundreds of geometric propositions. It's this incredible, rigorous, sequential structure for knowledge itself.
Wow. So while Aristotle was structuring philosophical concepts, Euclid was structuring mathematical proof. Happening around the same broad era, but maybe different places?
A profound parallel, yes. A double systemization, one conceptual, one mathematical, logical, and both coming out of that Greek impulse to find order.
Which leads us perfectly to Archimedes, also 3rd century BC, roughly contemporary with Euclid, maybe a bit later. Also part of that Hellenistic Alexandria-influenced world, though working in Syracuse. Archimedes feels like the next logical step. He's the applicator, right?
Yeah, absolutely the applicator. He clearly knew Euclid's work, that pure, abstract, geometric form. But Archimedes took that rigorous thinking and applied it directly to the physical world.
Bridging math and physics.
Yes. He gave motion and force and real-world substance to Euclid's beautiful but kind of static structures. calculating pi, figuring out levers and pulleys, hydrostatics.
Buoyancy.
Buoyancy, exactly. Taking the abstract and making it intensely practical. This is really characteristic of that Hellenistic shift, knowledge serving practical ends, engineering, warfare.
And that famous Eureka story just sums it all up, doesn't it?
It really does. King Hiram II asked him, "Is my crown pure gold or did the goldsmith cheat me? And you can't melt it down."
A practical problem for a ruler.
A very practical problem. And the breakthrough, realizing how volume displaces water, comes in the bath. It wasn't abstract thought for virtue's sake. It was rigorous mathematical insight, solving a concrete, material, even political challenge. Knowledge put to work. Hashtag #disprofred. So if we zoom out and look at the whole sweep, you see the Greek intellectual center, its main questions moving from what is the world back in phase 1
to how do I live peacefully within it by phase 3.
Exactly. And that philosophical journey, it sort of mirrors the geography too. From Athens, the home of pure theoretical philosophy, especially Plato and Aristotle, to places like Alexandria, the Hellenistic centers where applied science, engineering, and that meticulous system building like Euclid's really flourished.
So what's the big takeaway for us listening today? The Greek legacy, it's not just, a list of famous dead guys.
Not at all.
It's the actual frameworks they built. The framework for rational inquiry, thanks largely to Aristotle, and the framework for axiomatic proof-based science, thanks to Euclid. They literally structured how we think about knowing things.
Well said. They give us the blueprints for knowledge. And that transition we tracked, from the classical philosopher in Athens thinking about the ideal state, Plato's Republic, to the Hellenistic scientists like Archimedes, focused on very practical, immediate applications. That shift is critical.
Yeah.
Which leaves us maybe with a final thought for you to mull over.
Okay.
Does knowledge become more valuable, or maybe just more urgent, when thinkers are focused on building the perfect ideal society? Or does it become more potent when empires are fragmenting and the focus shifts to practical survival, application, and maybe individual peace?
When it's about ideals versus when it's about coping. That's something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.